It is not every day that one is invited to a wedding at Marchmont Hall. The estate, nestled along the Hampshire countryside, is the kind of place that whispers of lineage and old money. The groom, Henry Duval, heir to the Duval textile fortune, was set to marry Miss Camilla Weatherby, the daughter of a retired admiral with a spine like a ruler and a reputation as stern as his command. Camilla, however, possessed neither her father's rigidity nor her mother's discretion. She was radiant, impulsive, and far too modern for the tastes of the Marchmont crowd. I had come as a guest of Camilla's cousin, Charlotte, a bright-eyed girl with a wry tongue and a curious admiration for Hercule Poirot. It was through her that Poirot himself had been extended a polite invitation to the affair. Not as an investigator, mind you, but as a distinguished guest. Naturally, I accompanied him, and I must admit I was secretly grateful for the detour from London's humidity and our quiet summer lull. The wedding was set for the first Saturday of August, and the estate had been polished to within an inch of its life. Servants bustled about with silver trays, white roses were draped from archways, and champagne seemed to appear wherever one's hand hesitated. It was a picturesque scene, the kind captured in magazines or framed in drawing rooms, and yet, beneath it all, there lingered something off. Poirot noticed it before anyone else, of course. He leaned toward me as the string quartet played something soft and forgettable. "Regardez, Hastings," he murmured. "You see how the mother of the groom does not smile. And the groom, he wipes his brow not from heat, but from worry. There is no joy in his eyes, no anticipation." I looked. Lady Margaret Duval sat upright, her lips thin and her fingers curled tightly around a glass of something dark. Henry stood near the garden steps, glancing repeatedly at the house with the expression of a man hoping for either rescue or reprieve. "Cold feet," I offered with a shrug. "Happens to the best of them." Poirot sighed. "Ah non, mon ami. Cold feet do not explain the tension of the jaw, the hesitation in each greeting, or the glances exchanged between Miss Weatherby and the gentleman in the grey waistcoat by the hydrangeas." I followed his gaze. The man in grey waistcoat, an angular fellow with slicked hair and the air of someone trying to appear nonchalant, was watching Camilla with more interest than decency allowed. She returned the look, briefly, before forcing a smile at an approaching aunt. I was about to ask more when a bell chimed, summoning guests to the ceremony. Chairs were aligned beneath the grand oak tree, and as we took our places, Poirot tilted his head and muttered, "We are about to witness a performance, Hastings. A spectacle, yes, but not of love." The ceremony proceeded smoothly enough. No stuttering vows or misplaced rings. The couple said, "I do," though I noticed Henry's voice lacked conviction. As they kissed, doves were released, the guests applauded, and the atmosphere lifted, briefly. It was not until the wedding breakfast in the ballroom that disaster struck. Dessert had just been served, an elaborate pistachio tart with spun sugar towers, when Camilla rose to make a toast. She looked striking in her ivory dress, her cheeks slightly flushed, her smile brittle. She raised her glass, cleared her throat, and began, "To love, which—" The glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the marble floor. Her eyes rolled back. She collapsed. Screams pierced the air. Henry lunged forward, catching her just as she hit the ground. Chairs were overturned. Someone called for a doctor. Someone else called for brandy. Poirot did not move. He remained seated, hands steepled, eyes narrowed. Within moments, the hall was chaos. Camilla was carried out by servants, and Henry, pale as death, trailed behind. Lady Duval began sobbing. The man in the grey waistcoat vanished. Poirot turned to me, his voice calm as ever. "Come, Hastings. Our holiday has ended. There has been a murder." I gaped. Surely she fainted. She did not faint. She was poisoned, subtle, swift, and theatrical. Someone timed it with intention. A performance, as I said. But the question is, for whom? By the time we reached the drawing room, Camilla was dead. The doctor, flustered and breathless, shook his head and confirmed Poirot's suspicion. Acute convulsions, likely a toxic agent. It had acted within seconds. The champagne glass was untouched after the toast, but her dessert plate was clean. Poirot examined the plate. Let no one remove anything. Hastings, note the time and fetch the head butler. Yes, but what shall I say? He fixed his gaze on me. Say that Hercule Poirot is taking charge. Thus began the strangest wedding reception I have ever attended. The bride lay still in a side chamber. The groom was seated and sedated, and the guests, once chatty and champagne-filled, were silent, frightened, and gathered in the great hall under Poirot's watchful eye. From guest to suspect, the transformation was swift, and so was Poirot's. He stood with elegance and authority, adjusting his tie. Mesdames et messieurs, he said, it grieves me to bring sorrow on such a day of celebration, but I fear a great crime has been committed in your midst. I will speak to you all in time, but let me say this. One amongst you harbored resentment strong enough to kill, and the truth, it will come to light. He paused, then added softly, it always does. And in that moment, as thunder rolled in the distance and the guests turned pale, I knew this was no ordinary crime of passion. It was a puzzle. Deliberate, calculated, and as Poirot would say, formidable. The wedding had ended in murder. But the marriage, that had died long before. By the time Poirot formally requested the drawing room for private interviews, the sun had dipped behind the rolling hills of Marchmont, casting a long shadow across the lawn in the hearts of those within. Servants shuffled quietly, their eyes lowered. Guests remained in the main hall, murmuring, sipping what remained of the champagne, or simply staring into the air as if the gravity of death had stilled time. The joyous clinking of crystal had given way to silence broken only by Poirot's voice as he summoned the first guest, Henry Duval. Henry entered slowly, his once pristine collar now crumpled, his jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled back, and his complexion gray. He looked less like a groom and more like a widower. Poirot motioned to the seat across from him and gestured gently. Monsieur Duval, sit. Let us not waste time. You loved her, n'est-ce pas? Henry swallowed. I did. Yes. Camilla was complicated, but I loved her. At least I thought I did. That is not the same, monsieur, Poirot said mildly. And I'm afraid that for such a crime, emotions matter. Not the kind we perform, but the kind we suppress. Tell me, did she ever speak of fear? Of threats? No, Henry replied, his eyes glassy. But she had been distracted lately. She said she felt trapped, that something wasn't right. And yet you went through with the wedding. Henry clenched his jaw. Because I had to. The arrangements, the family expectations, it was too late to pull out. She insisted we go ahead. She said she had a plan. A plan? Poirot repeated sharply. To do what? I don't know. She never told me. Henry leaned forward, desperate. But she said it would all make sense. That soon she'd be free. Poirot tapped the armrest of his chair gently. And you know of no enemies, no scandals. Henry hesitated. Camilla was fond of people, you understand. She drew them in. She had many admirers, but only one I ever truly distrusted. Poirot's eyes flickered. And that man is? Sebastian Vale. Poirot nodded. The man in the grey waistcoat. Yes, Henry said darkly. He loved her. She loved the attention. He never backed away. Even today, he stared at her like he still had a chance. Poirot waved a hand. Merci, monsieur. That will be all, for now. Henry stood slowly, his steps uneven as he exited. Poirot turned to me. Sebastian Vale, he murmured. A man who does not accept loss, oui? Let us meet this man. Minutes later, Sebastian Vale entered with the air of someone amused to be involved. He took his seat with an arrogant tilt to his shoulders and brushed non-existent lint from his trousers. "So," he said, "we're playing detective, are we?" Poirot smiled politely. "Non, monsieur. I'm the detective. You're the man who, until today, watched another marry the woman you once adored. Tell me, what did that feel like?" Sebastian smirked. "Like watching a car crash in slow motion. You want to look away. You can't. You were close to Miss Weatherby. Close enough, but not recently. Yet you were invited to the wedding." Sebastian shrugged. "Her father disliked me. Her mother feared me. That only made Camilla more curious. But lately, she pulled away, said she needed clarity. I respected that." "Did you?" Poirot asked quietly. "You did not follow her onto the terrace this morning. You did not whisper to her during the toast?" Sebastian paused for the briefest moment before replying. "We exchanged a look, that's all. A goodbye." Poirot tapped his fingertips together. "And what did you do after she collapsed?" "Left. For air. Panic isn't my scene." Poirot's gaze was fixed. "You know poisons?" Sebastian's eyes gleamed. "I know people. That's more dangerous, don't you think?" Poirot didn't answer. He merely nodded and waved him out. We took a brief pause, and I leaned toward Poirot. "You suspect him?" "I suspect everyone, Hastings. But he is too calm. The man who kills out of passion rarely waits this long. He wants to be seen. And Vale, he plays the audience, not the game." The next to be summoned was Lady Margaret Duval, Henry's mother. She entered briskly, with a handkerchief held firmly in her palm and disdain etched into every wrinkle of her face. Poirot rose with grace. "Madame, thank you. May I offer my condolences for this day's loss?" She waved him off. "There is no need. I had little affection for that girl, and I don't pretend otherwise." Poirot's eyebrows lifted. "Why so, madame?" "She was beneath us. Flighty, manipulative. That smile, always too quick, too rehearsed. I don't know what spell she had over my son, but it clouded his judgment." "Did you confront her?" "Of course. I told her plainly I would not have her ruin the family name." She laughed at me. She said she'd ruin it her way, with a flourish. Poirot's gaze narrowed. "So she had enemies. And you, madame, you had motive." She stiffened. "Are you accusing me?" "I accuse no one. I only observe. Tell me, did you eat the pistachio tart?" "I loathe nuts," she said. "I didn't touch it." "Merci." When she left, Poirot exhaled. "Pride, Hastings, makes enemies even of ghosts, but the lady is too arrogant to kill subtly." 3 interviews, I muttered. "All of them have reason. And yet none give us clarity. We must now speak to someone who has nothing to gain, someone who sees all but says little." "The butler?" "No," Poirot said, standing. "Charlotte Weatherby, the cousin. Watchers notice what participants miss." Charlotte was already waiting outside, her arms crossed, face unreadable. She walked in without invitation and sat as if she had expected the moment. Poirot inclined his head. "Mademoiselle, tell me what you saw." "Everything," she said softly. "I saw Sebastian slip into the garden with Camilla this morning. I saw Lady Duval speaking to the chef, arguing. I saw Camilla put something in her own handbag right before the ceremony. I don't know what it was." Poirot blinked. "You are observant." "I watch. It's how I survive this family." "And what of Henry?" Charlotte hesitated. "He loved her, but he feared what she might do. Last night I heard them arguing outside the library. She told him, 'I'll end it on my terms, not yours.'" Poirot leaned forward. "And what do you think she meant?" Charlotte met his eyes. "I think Camilla knew she was in danger. I think she was trying to expose someone, but she waited too long." Poirot's eyes gleamed with sudden fire. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have helped more than you know." When she left, I asked, "So, do we have a lead?" Poirot turned to the window, gazing at the darkening skies. "Not a lead, Hastings. A pattern, and patterns do not lie." The morning after the tragedy dawned under a grey, brooding sky. The guests remained at Marchmont Hall as Poirot had politely yet firmly requested. The authorities had arrived late in the night, conducted the most perfunctory of examinations, and declared that poison had indeed been the cause. The local inspector, a plump man named Garraway with more moustache than intuition, was eager to close the case. And by noon, he had found his answer. He called it an open and shut affair. Poirot and I were seated in the breakfast room, though neither of us touched a crumb. Inspector Garraway arrived, puffed with pride, holding a folded napkin in one hand and a smug smile on his face. "We found it, Mr. Poirot," he said, slapping the napkin onto the table and opening it to reveal a delicate silver teaspoon. Its tip was tinged a faint green. Poirot looked at it with mild interest. "And what, may I ask, is that?" "The spoon from Miss Weatherby's dessert plate. It contains traces of cyanide mixed with a compound used in pest control, most likely laced into the syrup on her tart. Enough to kill a horse, they said." Poirot nodded once. "And who had access to the desserts?" "The chef, naturally. But more interestingly, the assistant cook, one Miss Elaine Marsh, was seen entering the pantry unsupervised before the wedding breakfast." "Indeed." Poirot leaned back. "And does Mademoiselle Marsh have a motive?" Garraway beamed. "She was dismissed 2 weeks ago after Camilla accused her of stealing jewelry. The family hushed it up to avoid scandal, but she was only reinstated yesterday because the staff was short. Seems she wanted revenge. We've found the key to the pantry in her apron, and she can't explain how it got there." Poirot gave him a gentle smile. "Bravo, monsieur. Your efficiency is admirable. May I speak with Mademoiselle Marsh?" "She's being held in the cellar. Under supervision." Poirot stood. "Let us go at once." We followed Garraway through the stone corridor that led beneath Marchmont Hall. The cellar was cold, lined with dusty wine racks and crates of unused china. Elaine Marsh sat on a wooden chair, her arms folded, cheeks blotchy from tears. She looked no older than 25, with auburn hair escaping from a loose bun. Poirot stepped forward. "Mademoiselle, I am Hercule Poirot. I ask you only for the truth. Did you poison the tart?" She shook her head violently. "No, sir. I didn't even prepare the desserts. That was Jean. He's the pastry chef. I was helping with the soup and arranging cutlery." Poirot's voice remained gentle. "Yet the key to the pantry was found in your apron." "I don't know how. I haven't been near that cupboard in days, I swear it." "And the accusation of theft?" Her face turned red. "I never stole anything. Miss Weatherby lost a brooch and blamed me because I was new. It was found 2 days later in her dressing room. She never apologized, but I didn't poison her." Poirot looked at her for a long moment, then turned to Garraway. "You believe she's the killer?" "She's the only one with motive, means, and opportunity. That key puts her at the scene." Poirot tilted his head. "And yet, Hastings, observe. The young lady has bitten her nails down to the skin. She weeps not in self-pity, but in frustration. She did not ask once whether she will be arrested. She asks only to be believed." Garraway frowned. "So you don't agree?" "I do not disagree, monsieur. I simply hesitate. The method is too clever for vengeance. Poisoning a tart among dozens of identical servings requires planning, precision, not rage." Poirot turned to Elaine again. "Did anyone else enter the kitchen before the meal?" "Yes," she said quickly. "Lady Duval. She argued with Chef Jean. She said the menu had been changed behind her back. She stormed out with a basket of pears for the fruit table." Poirot's brow twitched. "And where was Jean during the final preparations?" "In the cold room, chilling the tart bases." Poirot nodded. "Merci, mademoiselle. You may remain here for the moment, but I believe you have told the truth. As we ascended the stone steps again, I whispered, "You believe her." "I believe she is innocent, Hastings, but that does not make her useless. A lie told to frame her would only come from one person, someone with something very specific to hide." We returned to the dining hall. Poirot examined the dessert table, now cleared, and looked toward the silver trays set aside by staff. He plucked a linen cloth and sniffed it. "There was no need to poison every tart," he said. "Only one." "But they were all identical," I protested. "How could the killer know which tart she would eat?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Because, Hastings, it was placed before her. That is the key." He requested the presence of Jean, the pastry chef. A stout man with sweat-stained whites and trembling hands appeared shortly after. "Monsieur," Poirot greeted him, "who served the desserts?" "Not me. I prepared them in the kitchen and laid them on the silver trays. Then the butlers carried them out." "All butlers served at random?" Jean hesitated. "No, sir. For the bridal table, the head butler, Mr. Linfield, insisted on placing each dish himself." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Merci. That will be all." We found Mr. Linfield in the drawing room, polishing cutlery with a cloth far too pristine for such work. He was thin, balding, and spoke in clipped tones. "You served the desserts personally?" Poirot asked without preamble. "I did, sir, as is customary for the bridal party." "And how did you choose which tart to place before Miss Weatherby?" "I didn't choose. I took the next tart from the tray and placed it. No different from the rest." "And who prepared the tray?" "I believe the sous chef handed it to me. I was focused on presentation." Poirot nodded. "Tell me, have you ever worked for the Weatherby family directly?" Linfield blinked. "Many years ago, yes. I was briefly in Admiral Weatherby's service before coming to Marchmont." "Indeed. You must know Miss Weatherby well, then." "Not well, sir. Only from passing observation." Poirot paused. "And did you also know that the Weatherby family recently discovered that the Admiral's fortune had been mismanaged by his late business partner, and Camilla intended to bring the matter to court?" Linfield's fingers stilled on the silver. "No," he said after too long a silence. "I did not." Poirot smiled. "You may go." As he left, I turned to Poirot. "You suspect him now?" "I suspect everyone, Hastings. But I also collect timing. Linfield, like Elaine, handled the food, but only one of them had reason to switch a specific plate. And the police? They are satisfied. For now. But we are not, eh?" Poirot sat and steepled his fingers. "The killer wants us to believe the answer is obvious. That is always when I become most suspicious." A knock at the door interrupted our thoughts. A young footman entered, holding a torn scrap of parchment. "Sir, this was found in Miss Weatherby's handbag. We didn't think it mattered before, but now." Poirot took the note and read it aloud. "You said you'd end it your way, but you forgot. So can I." He looked up at me, eyes burning with certainty. "We are no longer dealing with a lover's quarrel, Hastings. This was premeditated to the final second." I had seen Poirot engage suspects before, his delicate prodding and his subtle games, but rarely had I seen him shift so quickly into what he called la petite chasse psychologique, the little psychological hunt. After reading the note found in Camilla's handbag, his entire posture changed. His tone softened further, his words became more pointed, yet more polite, and his observation sharpened like a blade concealed within a silk glove. The note had confirmed what he already suspected. This was no spontaneous crime. The killer had written those words before the wedding, perhaps even before Camilla had resolved to go through with it. "You said you'd end it your way, but you forgot. So can I." It was not just a threat. It was a declaration of war between two people who once knew each other far too well. Poirot's first stop was Sebastian Vale. We found him alone in the billiard room, rolling a single ivory ball across the green felt table, his expression unreadable. He didn't turn as we entered. "I was wondering when you'd come back," he said. "Let me guess. You found something theatrical. A note, a whispered promise." Poirot stepped forward calmly. "Oui, monsieur. You are clever, but not as clever as you think. Tell me, did you write to her?" Sebastian looked up. What would be the point? "The point, monsieur, is not the effect. It is the timing. The note was written in anger, but delivered in precision." "You were angry that she went through with it, were you not?" Sebastian smiled, slow and cold. "She made her choices. So did I." Poirot moved to the window. "You once loved her." "I never said I didn't. But love, monsieur, real love, does not carry poison in its pocket." Sebastian's eyes narrowed. "Is that what you think of me?" "I think you are impulsive, but not calculating. And the crime, it was calculated. Not an act of passion, but control. That is not your style." Sebastian stiffened. "Then why the games?" "Because, monsieur," Poirot said softly, "someone wants you to look guilty." Sebastian's jaw twitched. He turned away. "She was scared, you know, that last week. I saw it. She said she had something, some leverage, that she was going to make someone pay." "Did she say who?" "No, only that someone close to her was lying, hiding something." Poirot's voice turned thoughtful. "Merci, monsieur. One last question. Did you speak to her in private that morning?" Sebastian nodded slowly. 5 minutes. No more. She asked if I'd changed. I said no. She smiled. Said, "Then neither have I." "What did that mean to you?" Sebastian shrugged. It meant she still didn't trust anyone. Poirot left him there, still rolling the ivory ball, but the smugness had vanished from his expression. Outside the room I asked, "So, still not your man?" Poirot nodded. "No. He is full of bitterness, but not of courage. Whoever did this had the nerve to walk through servants, guests, and lovers, and leave no trace. That is not Sebastian Vale." "And the note?" "He knows of it, but did not write it. That note was meant to sting, subtly, like a whisper in a crowded room." Poirot stood still for a moment in the corridor, then turned. "It is time to knock on the Admiral's door." We found Admiral Weatherby on the back terrace, smoking his pipe with military precision. A stoic man with a hawk-like nose and shoulders still stiff from years of command. He did not stand when we approached. "Detective," he greeted, nodding at Poirot. "I assume you want answers." "If you would be so kind, Admiral." The Admiral tapped his pipe against the ashtray. "I did not care for my daughter's choices, but I am not sentimental. She was a woman grown, and she had secrets." Poirot's eyes lit. "Secrets, monsieur. You knew?" "I suspected. She had been acting strangely, leaving the house at odd hours, letters she wouldn't explain. Then last month she demanded to see the family lawyer, said she needed to change her will." "Did she?" "No idea. She refused to speak of it afterward." "And what of her fiancé, Henry?" "Weak, always was. He depended on Camilla more than she did on him. I warned him she was dangerous, but he thought he could fix her." Poirot's tone remained neutral. "Did you attend the breakfast?" "I left before dessert. I had a headache. Saw nothing." Poirot turned to me, then looked back at the Admiral. "Do you know who stood to benefit from Camilla's death?" The Admiral looked him square in the eye. "That is your job, Detective. But I'll tell you this. My daughter played games with dangerous people. One of them finally called her bluff." We thanked him and left. Back in the hallway, Poirot sighed. "So much stiffness, Hastings. Everyone here carries secrets like medals, but none wear guilt." "And yet we have a body," I replied grimly. Poirot gave me a side glance. "Indeed, and someone who remains almost invisible in this drama. Someone whose hands are everywhere, but name appears nowhere. I blinked. Who? Mr. Linfield, Poirot said softly. The head butler. But we've already... Yes, interviewed, observed. But Hastings, think again. Who else knew the exact seating order? Who else carried the specific plate to Camilla? Who else has worked in both the Duval and Weatherby houses? Who else has no alibi and yet no one questions him because he is staff? I frowned. But why would he? Poirot raised a finger. Motive we do not have. But opportunity, means, calm execution, he has all three. Just then, Charlotte Weatherby appeared in the corridor, her face pale. Mr. Poirot, you asked me to check something yesterday. I found it. She held out a slim black book. Poirot opened it slowly. A ledger. Inside, names and figures. She kept it hidden in her dressing table. It's an account of money transferred unofficially from the Duval estate to a shell company. Look here. 4 names. One of them is Linfield. Poirot's eyes lit up. Mademoiselle, you are magnificent. Charlotte swallowed. Camilla was going to expose it after the wedding. She said she needed to get through the ceremony first. And now she never will, Poirot murmured. We returned to Poirot's room. He laid the ledger beside the note. One, a threat. The other, a motive. He looked up. We are almost there, Hastings. But surely we must confront Linfield now. No, Poirot said. Not yet. The killer is proud, calculated. If we confront him, he will lie. But if we show him that the world is closing in, he will crack. I stared. So, you mean to apply pressure? Precisely. We begin the game, Hastings. The final game. Let him feel the noose before it tightens. He rang for the housekeeper. Madame Tilbury, please send word to all guests. I require their presence at 6 o'clock in the salon. Everyone? He turned back to me. Tonight, mon ami, I begin the final arrangement. And will you reveal the killer? He shook his head. Not yet. But I will move them like pieces on a board. The mind, Hastings. It must be disarmed before it can be exposed. 6 o'clock came with an ominous hush. The great salon of Marchmont Hall, once host to music and polite laughter, now housed a dozen stiff-backed chairs arranged in a semicircle. Poirot had made the request personally, and when Poirot requests, people obey, whether out of curiosity or fear, I could never quite tell. What struck me most as they filtered in, Lady Duval, Sebastian Vale, Charlotte, Henry, Admiral Weatherby, and even the jittery pastry chef Jean, was how none could meet the other's eyes. Suspicion had begun to settle like dust on every surface. Poirot stood before them, not in a theatrical stance as some detectives might, but composed, his fingers lightly pressed together in front of him. He did not accuse. He observed. Mesdames et messieurs, he began softly, I thank you for your patience. I gather you here not to name the guilty, but to remind them they are seen. Everything one hides leaves a shadow, no matter how carefully they believe the light has been arranged. We are now in the shadows. He let the silence linger. Then, as if dismissing them from class, he said, Merci. That is all, for now. No explanation, no questions, just tension left to ferment in each mind. They dispersed in pairs or alone, whispering, glancing, trying not to appear alarmed while clearly rattled. Poirot turned to me. Now we wait. For what? For someone to act, he said simply. He was right. That night, just past midnight, Charlotte knocked on my door in a panic. I barely had time to grab my dressing gown before she pulled me into the hallway. He's gone, she whispered. Who? Mr. Linfield. I saw him packing a bag through the side window of the servants' wing. He slipped out the back. Within 5 minutes, Poirot was dressed and leading the way down the narrow corridors that lined the servants' quarters. Rain tapped against the glass like fingernails, and the lights flickered with the occasional gust. We reached Linfield's room. Small, spare, clinical. His bed was stripped, his wardrobe open, and his satchel gone. But not all was tidy. On the floor lay a pair of gloves. On the desk, a hastily torn envelope. And beside the stove, tucked into a book of poetry, a slip of paper burned on one edge but still legible. Poirot snatched it up, reading aloud. "She has the ledger. If she opens it, I'm finished." He tapped the words with one finger. We were not fast enough. "Do you think he's fleeing?" Poirot's brow furrowed. "Or finishing what he began? Hastings, where is Charlotte?" We turned at once and rushed back through the corridors toward the east wing where Charlotte had taken a guest room. I knocked once. No answer. Again, louder. Still no reply. Poirot opened the door. The room was empty, the bed untouched, the window open, a drop of blood on the sill. Poirot spun on his heel. "To the gardens. Now." The three of us, Poirot, myself, and a footman named Edmund, grabbed lanterns and descended the stone steps to the back gardens. Wind clawed at our coats, and the path was slick with mud. Somewhere to our right, a fox barked in the hedgerows. Then, suddenly, a scream, high, muffled, from the conservatory. Poirot didn't wait for us to catch up. He was faster than I'd ever seen him, moving through the dark like a man chasing the final page of a mystery. Inside the conservatory, the glass walls groaned with wind, ferns rustled. Flower pots clinked softly in the gusts, and beneath a tipped-over bench lay Charlotte, breathing but only barely. Her lip was bleeding, her hands bound. Poirot knelt beside her. "Mademoiselle, it is over. You are safe." She tried to speak, but her voice was cracked with fear. I cut the cords at her wrists while Poirot examined the room. There, behind the hydrangea pot, he found the second clue, a rag soaked in chloroform. Poirot took one long breath. "Linfield is desperate now. He believes Charlotte will expose him. He returned not to flee but to silence. That, Hastings, is the mark of a man cornered." We carried Charlotte inside and called for the doctor, who declared her shaken but stable. She was sent to rest under watch. Poirot paced the study, his expression tight. "Everything moves faster now," he said. "Tonight he made a mistake." He revealed his hand. "You think he tried to kill her?" Poirot nodded. He believes she holds the evidence that ties him to Camilla's death. And he is right. At that moment, Inspector Garraway returned, disheveled and half-drenched, summoned by the commotion. He was quick to accuse Linfield of attempted murder, which Poirot did not contest. But when Garraway insisted they circulate his name to local authorities for immediate arrest, Poirot hesitated. "Let him run," he said. Garraway blinked. "What? Why?" "Because the guilty man running to hide will always carry his crime with him. But the guilty man lured into thinking he can outsmart everyone, that man will return to the scene." Garraway looked baffled, but agreed, reluctantly. Poirot turned back to me. "We give him one last night to believe he's free." "Isn't that risky?" "Mais oui. But if we corner him now, he will claim innocence and destroy what proof remains." "No, Hastings. The truth must catch him mid-step. It must be inevitable." We stayed up through the night in Poirot's quarters. He said little, sipping coffee and reviewing the ledger Charlotte had found. He laid out the names in a diagram: Camilla, Henry, Lady Duval, Linfield, and two unfamiliar entries. One had been scratched out with a heavy hand. The other, Well Marchmont Holdings. Poirot tapped the page. Camilla stumbled onto something deeper. Fraud, theft, names that don't belong. I believe Linfield was a pawn in a much larger deception, but he killed to protect himself, not the machine. He is the weak link. At dawn, a maid knocked. "Sir, something odd. There's movement in the chapel." "The chapel?" "Mr. Linfield. I saw him go in with a bundle. Then he locked the door. Poirot rose at once. "Come, Hastings. The final scene begins." The Marchmont Chapel was small, old, and rarely used. A stone building behind the orchard, it had been locked for years. Inside were pews thick with dust and a faded altar. We approached slowly, careful not to make sound. Poirot peered through the side window. "There," he whispered. "He's burning something in the brazier." We crept to the side door, which had not been secured. Poirot opened it silently. Linfield stood with his back to us, tossing pages into a metal dish atop a stone plinth. Flames licked upwards, consuming letters, receipts, and, at the bottom, a single photograph. Poirot stepped forward. "Bon matin, Monsieur Linfield." Linfield whirled around, startled. "You shouldn't be here." "On the contrary," Poirot said. "This is precisely where I belong." He gestured to the brazier. "Destroying evidence is a confession of fear." Linfield's eyes were bloodshot. "You don't know what you're dealing with." "But I do," Poirot said calmly. "I know you were complicit in siphoning money through shell companies. I know Camilla threatened to expose the scheme. I know she planned to do so after the wedding. And I know you poisoned her dessert, using a spoon swapped by your own hand." Linfield backed away. "She ruined everything. She laughed when I begged her to stop. She said she'd drag us all down with her. I had no choice." "There is always a choice, monsieur," Poirot said, voice low. "And you made yours." Linfield dropped the last paper. Poirot stepped forward, extinguished the fire with a cloth, and turned to the stunned inspector behind us. "Monsieur Garraway, if you please." The arrest was quiet. Linfield offered no resistance. He was handcuffed with only a whisper. "You don't understand. It wasn't just me." Poirot nodded. "That, monsieur, I already suspected." With Linfield in custody, Inspector Garraway seemed eager to wrap the matter up and leave Marchmont Hall behind. He had a killer, a motive, and a confession, however fractured. But Poirot, as always, was not so easily convinced. "I admire the inspector's confidence," he told me as we walked the grounds later that afternoon. "But I do not share it. Linfield killed, yes, but Hastings, I do not believe he acted alone." "You think someone else is involved?" "Mon ami," he said, "I think Linfield was a tool. A useful one, but not the mind behind the deed. He lacked ambition. He was a man made to follow orders, not to orchestrate a scheme involving offshore accounts, forged transfers, and silent threats." We paused under a weeping willow near the orchard. Poirot removed a page from the ledger Charlotte had recovered and handed it to me. "Read the second to last entry." I squinted at the looping handwriting. "L. Marchmont Holdings. Transfer of £50,000. Account closed following advisement by L.D. L.D., Poirot said quietly. "Lady Margaret Duval. Her initials appear several times. Observe here and here. Memos attached to fund redirections. Camilla had no access to these unless she had help." "You mean Charlotte?" He shook his head. "Charlotte stumbled onto them, but someone else gave Camilla the original thread to pull. Someone who could access Duval accounts. Someone with financial literacy and reason to silence the girl who uncovered it all." He fell silent, hands clasped behind his back, as we turned back toward the house. Inside, Charlotte sat in the morning room, pale but upright. She had insisted on staying after Linfield's arrest, claiming she wanted to be present for the end of it. She welcomed us with a tired smile. "Feeling stronger?" Poirot asked. "Enough to sit up and listen, yes." He sat opposite her. "Charlotte, tell me truly, who first led Camilla to those documents?" Charlotte hesitated. "I don't know. She never said. Only that someone in the family was laundering money using the Duval Trust. She thought it might be her future mother-in-law, but there was someone else. She kept saying, 'It's deeper than I thought.'" Poirot nodded. "And what of Henry?" "He didn't know, I'm certain. He adored Camilla, but I think he was also afraid of her." She had a way of pressing at wounds, even the ones she promised to protect. Merci, mademoiselle. We left her resting again and went directly to Lady Margaret's suite. She received us coldly, seated beneath a towering portrait of her late husband, her face as unreadable as marble. "Come to deliver your grand solution?" she asked. "Not yet, madame. I only wish to speak to you about finances." Her eyes didn't flicker, but the silence that followed was telling. Camilla Weatherby had in her possession a ledger, Poirot continued, documenting a series of shell transfers through Marchmont and Duval estates. Several of the memos bear your initials. "I manage the family accounts," she said coolly. "I've done so since my husband's death." "Of course. And what of L. Marchmont Holdings? That name appears quite often. A real estate venture, one of many, closed years ago." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft. "Madame, the account was closed 3 weeks ago, shortly after Camilla announced her engagement. Coincidence?" Lady Duval's lips tightened. "You are accusing me of fraud." "No, madame. I'm asking whether you would kill to keep a secret." She stood. "You are finished here." Poirot remained seated. Camilla was ready to go public. After the wedding, she would have filed a formal complaint. She gave herself a deadline, and someone in this house, made sure she would never speak again. Lady Duval's hands clenched. She was reckless. She would have destroyed everything my husband built. She didn't understand discretion. She didn't understand loyalty. Poirot's tone was colder now. "You did know." "I knew she had suspicions, that she was digging where she shouldn't. I warned her. I told her not to cross me." Poirot stood. "And did you tell Linfield to poison her?" She glared at him. "I never told anyone to do anything. If he acted, he did it on his own. Yet you benefited. You inherited control over the remaining accounts. And your son? He remains blind to it all." She turned her face to the window. "It's not my crime, but I won't mourn her." Poirot left without another word. In the corridor, I whispered, "Do you believe her?" "I believe she is ruthless, but not reckless. Linfield's fear was personal. Whoever commanded him did so through leverage, not partnership." That evening, Poirot asked to meet Henry in the library. The young man arrived looking more composed than I'd seen him in days, though the shadows under his eyes betrayed his exhaustion. "I want to understand, Mr. Duval." Poirot began gently. "What did you know of your mother's dealings?" Henry's face twisted in confusion. "Nothing. She handles the estate. I trust her. She always said business wasn't my concern." "And Camilla, did she tell you anything?" He nodded. "Only that she'd discovered something wrong. She said there were funds being redirected. She asked me to access some old family records, but I didn't know what I was looking for. She wouldn't say." Poirot was quiet for a moment. "Henry, your fiancée was murdered. Not by a jealous rival, not by a mad woman, but by someone protecting a secret about your family's wealth. What would you do to find the truth?" Henry's voice was hoarse. "Anything." Poirot handed him the ledger. "Then start with this." Later that night, as I sat with Poirot by the fire, I asked the question that had been gnawing at me since Linfield's arrest. "Do you think Camilla knew she'd be killed?" Poirot didn't answer immediately. He gazed into the flames, eyes narrowed. "She knew she was circling danger. That is why she left clues. The note, the ledger. She suspected someone might act, but not before the wedding. She believed she had time, but she didn't." "No," he said softly. "And that, Hastings, is what tells me there's someone else. Someone who knew her schedule, her habits. Someone who could move freely among the servants and the family alike." He rose and opened his notebook again. "One more name," he said. "The one that Linfield scratched out." He showed me the page. A.W. Admiral Weatherby. Perhaps. Or perhaps someone else entirely. There are too many missing pieces, but one thing is certain. Linfield was silenced not by threat alone, but by a promise. A deal. Which means the real mastermind is still free. Poirot nodded slowly. And until they believe the danger is past, they will not reveal themselves. He closed the notebook with finality. But when they do, I will be waiting. The next day passed in deceptive stillness. Inspector Garraway had departed with Linfield in custody, satisfied that his job was complete. Most of the guests had also quietly packed and gone, leaving only the core family members and a few remaining staff behind. Marchmont Hall stood as it had before the wedding, outwardly unchanged, but with a tension in the air that made even the curtains seem to hang differently. I found Poirot standing on the east veranda that morning, gazing out over the hedges with hands clasped behind his back. "It is nearly ready, Hastings," he said without turning. "What is?" He glanced over. The reveal. The final act. But it must be perfect. The guilty party still walks among us. They believe Linfield has taken the blame and they are beginning to relax. That is when they will make the fatal misstep. I frowned. But if Linfield acted under someone's command, and that someone hasn't been caught, why would they take risks now? "Because guilt is not static," Poirot replied. "It is not like a book you can close and hide on a shelf. It grows restless. The guilty mind imagines cracks that do not exist and creates pressure where none was applied. Soon it panics. It cannot help but act. And that, Hastings, is when I will strike." He left the veranda and returned to the library, where Henry Duval was seated at the long table, the ledger open before him. Ha looked up as Poirot entered. "I've read every line," Henry said. "Some of the names I recognize. Old business partners of my father. But there's a pattern here. Smaller amounts, hidden under minor trusts, funneled to accounts like L. Marchmont Holdings, then transferred again days later. Someone used these foundations as a front." "And your mother?" Poirot asked. Henry hesitated. "I don't want to believe she's involved. But her initials are all over these memos. She may not have created the scheme, but she approved the transactions." "Perhaps," Poirot said, "or perhaps she was signing off on paperwork she never read." "Do you think she killed Camilla?" Poirot's eyes sharpened. "I think your mother is ruthless. But murder is a blunt solution to a subtle problem. Someone else saw Camilla's threats as too dangerous. Someone closer, more threatened." He paused, then added, "Have you ever heard of a company called Astwell Advisory?" Henry blinked. "No. Why?" "Because it appears in the chain of transfers as the final recipient, and it's registered to someone with the initials A.W. "Wait," Henry said slowly. "Astwell. My grandfather was from a village called Astwell. That's where Admiral Weatherby grew up. My mother told me once." Poirot gave a tight nod. "Then perhaps it is time we paid a final visit to the Admiral." We found Admiral Weatherby seated in the study, polishing a silver cigar case. He looked up as we entered, unruffled as always. "I assume this is not a social call," he said. "No," Poirot replied. "It is the end of a trail, one that passes through banks, companies, and ultimately death. I believe you knew, Admiral, that Camilla was preparing to expose financial misconduct within the Duval estate. Weatherby said nothing. I believe she came to you first, that she found the trail leading to Astwell Advisory and asked you what it was." Still nothing. Poirot's voice lowered. "And I believe you lied. You told her it was nothing, but she didn't stop. She began tracing the shell transfers, and in doing so, she discovered the final link. Your name. A.W. Weatherby set the cigar case down carefully. "You think I killed my daughter?" "I think you engineered her silence," Poirot said. "Not with your own hands, but with Linfield's. A loyal man. Someone you could manipulate with promise or fear." Weatherby's voice was cold. "You have no proof?" "No," Poirot said. "But I have logic. You were the only one with the intelligence and access to construct the financial web she uncovered. You once controlled naval logistics. You understand misdirection and cover operations, and you've always treated Camilla as a liability. You said it yourself. She didn't understand loyalty. She was reckless, the Admiral snapped. She would have destroyed everything. But she trusted you, Poirot said gently. And that is why your betrayal cut deep. She never saw it coming. Weatherby stood slowly. I suggest you leave now, Mr. Poirot. Poirot met his eyes. I will, but I will see you again tonight. We left the room, and as soon as the door closed, Poirot exhaled. He is the spider at the center of the web. It was never Lady Duval. It was him, the money trail, the secrecy, Linfield's loyalty. It all points to Weatherby. But how do we prove it? I asked. We don't have anything direct. We will make him prove it himself, Poirot said, by showing him the truth is already known and watching him unravel. That evening, Poirot called for a second gathering. This time in the grand dining hall, stripped of finery, only the long oak table and a dozen chairs beneath a low chandelier. The guests returned, fewer than before, but enough. Henry, Charlotte, Lady Duval, Sebastian Vale, and Admiral Weatherby all took their seats. Poirot stood at the head of the table. I've asked you here not to accuse, but to conclude. A terrible crime was committed in this house, one that has stained the memory of what should have been a day of joy. He turned to Charlotte. Miss Weatherby discovered a financial conspiracy. Then to Henry. You were blind to it, but she was not. She followed the trail. Then to Lady Duval. She suspected you, but she was wrong. And finally to Weatherby. Because the final recipient of those hidden funds was Astwell Advisory, a shell company registered in a naval foundation linked to your name. Weatherby's face remained stone. You sent the letter found in Camilla's handbag. The handwriting was yours. She said she'd end it her way. You said you could do the same. Poirot pulled the letter from his pocket. The ink matches the pen in your study. And the wording, the tone, matches correspondence we retrieved from your naval archive. Circumstantial, Weatherby muttered. Poirot raised a hand. And yet you directed Linfield to poison her, promised him a future in your estate's trust. When he hesitated, you reminded him of the funds he'd mishandled, the letters he'd signed on your behalf. You turned his fear into action. Weatherby stood. You are a relic, Admiral, Poirot said, of a world where silence was strength and betrayal could be called duty. But your daughter was no fool. She left a trail behind, not for the law, but for the truth. And now, the truth has caught you. Silence. Then Lady Duval spoke, voice sharp. Did you really kill her, Edwin? Weatherby's hands clenched. She would have burned everything, he said. For what? Justice. Honor. She didn't understand that families survive only when they protect their own. And you thought murder was protection, she whispered. I did what had to be done. Poirot stepped forward. The authorities are already on their way. They have the financial trail, the letter, and the confession from Linfield implicating your name. Weatherby said nothing. He sat again, shoulders hunched, not in shame, but in weariness. And as the clock chimed 8, Poirot turned to me. It is finished, Hastings. And for once, I believed him. The drawing room was quiet after Admiral Weatherby's confession. Quiet in the way that often follows great storms. Not the quiet of peace, but of shock. Lady Duval sat rigid, her jaw clenched as if resisting the urge to lash out. Henry remained frozen, one hand loosely gripping the arm of his chair. Charlotte looked down, her fingers laced tightly in her lap. No one spoke. Poirot, always precise, merely adjusted his cuffs and turned to me. We must ensure the evidence is secured. Come, Hastings. We returned to Poirot's room where he laid out the items. The ledger, the torn note from Camilla's handbag, and the partial confession from Linfield that Inspector Garraway had forwarded from the station, Poirot's gaze lingered longest on the ledger. "You see," he said, tapping the corner, "this is what truly killed her. Not jealousy, not rivalry, but paper, numbers, and the fear of what they exposed." Was Camilla truly planning to go public with it? Poirot nodded. Yes, but not before the wedding. She had promised someone, perhaps Charlotte, perhaps herself, that she would give her family one last chance, one final act of grace. If they did not come clean, she would go forward with everything. He paused. And Weatherby knew it. He calculated that once married into the Duval fortune, Camilla would become unmovable. She would have influence, weight. So he struck before she could act. "But why use Linfield?" I asked. Surely Weatherby could have acted more directly. Poirot shook his head. Because Weatherby is not a man of spontaneity. He is methodical, a commander who moves others to act. Linfield was compromised, financially and morally. He had signed fraudulent documents under pressure from Weatherby during his earlier employment. It gave the Admiral leverage. He could blackmail him, promise protection in return for loyalty. Poirot retrieved a small piece of paper from his notebook. It was the ledger's final, unmarked page. "This," he said, "was removed by Weatherby before the wedding, but Camilla had written a summary note on it. Charlotte found it tucked behind the mirror frame this morning." "Read." I did. "The last transfer proves it. Astwell Advisory is not a ghost. It's his. He thinks I won't go public, but I will. After tomorrow, if this disappears, look there. Start with the name. He hides in titles, but the truth is in the initials. EWW. I have the final piece." "EWW," I whispered. "Edwin Walter Weatherby." Poirot nodded solemnly. She knew, she understood, and she left the answer behind. We returned to the main hall, just as a black motorcar pulled up at the estate's entrance. Inspector Garraway stepped out with 2 constables behind him. He looked somewhat surprised to see us waiting. "You were right," he said after hearing Poirot's summary. "Linfield mentioned orders from above in his final statement, but we had no name. We do now." Weatherby, sitting exactly where we had left him, made no protest as he was escorted out. He walked like a soldier still, head high, boots deliberate. It was Lady Duval who broke the silence, standing suddenly. "He shamed this family," she said to no one in particular. "And she nearly ruined it too." "Madame," Poirot said gently, "she saved it. Had she gone to the press, the scandal would have destroyed everything. She gave you time, opportunity, and you did not act. You allowed the silence to do your speaking." Lady Duval did not respond. She turned and left the room. Later that evening, Charlotte found us in the study. The fire crackled softly, and Poirot had finally allowed himself to sit. "It's over then?" she asked. Poirot gave her a small nod. "Oui, mademoiselle," though the cost was high. Charlotte came closer, her voice quieter now. "Camilla always knew it would be. She used to say, 'Truth is a slow knife. It cuts cleaner but deeper.'" Poirot smiled faintly. She was wise. Too wise for the world she tried to change. There was a pause. "Will you stay for the funeral?" she asked. "No," he said. "I believe it is best that those who knew her in life lay her to rest. I knew only her end." Charlotte lingered a moment longer, then left. When we were alone, I finally asked the question I had been holding in since Weatherby's arrest. "Did you always suspect him?" Poirot turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "No, Hastings. At first I suspected everyone. That is how it must be. But the pattern, it spoke. A man like Weatherby sees family as duty, not affection. Camilla represented unpredictability, exposure, and that he could not tolerate." He paused. "But what truly revealed him was the way he reacted to control slipping. Linfield's panic, the attempt on Charlotte, those were not the actions of a man seeking survival. They were moves from someone trying to maintain a grip on a crumbling empire. I wonder, I said slowly, what Camilla would have done if she had lived. Would she have forgiven Henry? His mother? Poirot gave a soft shrug. Perhaps. But forgiveness is not the absence of justice. She was giving them a chance to rise or fall by their own integrity. In the end, they chose silence. We sat in companionable silence for some time, watching the fire. Then Poirot rose and dusted off his sleeves. It is time we departed. This house will never be warm again. As we gathered our things, Henry appeared in the hallway, holding a letter in his hand. His eyes were tired, but his voice was steady. "She wrote this to me," he said. "Left it with the vicar to deliver after the wedding, just in case." He handed it to Poirot. Poirot opened it slowly, then read it aloud. "Henry, if you're reading this, it means something has gone wrong. I wanted to believe we could build something good, despite everything around us. But I also needed you to know the truth. Your family is not what it seems. The money has lies buried in it, and I couldn't stand by anymore. I didn't want to destroy what you loved, but I couldn't pretend either. If I fail to make it right, I hope someone else will. Maybe Charlotte. Maybe you. Love, Camilla." Henry didn't cry. He just nodded once, took the letter back, and walked away. Poirot sighed. Even in death, she left light behind. As we finally stepped out into the evening air, I turned one last time to look at Marchmont Hall, its tall windows dark, its proud stone walls silent once more. Poirot tipped his hat. "The case is closed, Hastings. But the heart, that remains open." And with that, we left behind the wedding that ended in murder, the house of secrets, and the woman who had tried, perhaps in vain, to change it all with truth. The late afternoon light slanted through the tall windows of Marchmont Hall's drawing room. Heavy drapes had been pulled back to invite what warmth remained in the air. A single long table stood in the center, cleared of all clutter except for a set of place cards. Each bore a name: Henry Duval, Lady Margaret Duval, Charlotte Weatherby, Sebastian Vale, Inspector Garraway, and myself. A chair at the head of the table had been reserved for Hercule Poirot. I took my seat with a sense of finality. Around me the room was silent except for the soft ticking of a grandfather clock. Henry sat to my right, shoulders drawn as if braced for a trial. Across from him sat Lady Duval, expression unreadable. Next to her was Charlotte, her eyes vigilant. Sebastian perched on the edge of his chair, restless. Inspector Garraway stood by the window, arms folded but attentive. A moment later, the door opened quietly and Poirot entered. He wore a dark suit, his posture impeccable, his mustache trimmed to precise lines. He paused in the doorway, surveying the assembled group, then stepped to the head of the table and motioned for us to sit. "Monsieur Duval, Madame, Mademoiselle, Monsieur Vale, Monsieur l'Inspecteur," he began in a measured tone. "I thank you for returning. This gathering is not a matter of ceremony. It is the close of one chapter and the opening of another." He looked at Henry first. "Monsieur Duval, you believed your bride vanished by misfortune. You grieved for her as any man would. Yet you did not know the danger she faced until it was too late." Henry's eyes flicked the ledger on the table. He nodded once, voice low. "I know now." Poirot turned to Lady Duval. "Madame, you saw your daughter-in-law as a threat to your family's reputation. You opposed the marriage. You spoke harsh words and demanded discretion, but you did not kill her." She nodded curtly. "I did not kill her." "I observed your anger," Poirot continued. "I observed how you pressed the chef to speed the meal. I observed how you watched Miss Weatherby with caution, but I never believed you capable of murder." Lady Duval's lips pressed together. She looked away. Next, Poirot addressed Sebastien. Monsieur Vale, you loved her. You watched her with longing. You thought her departure from courtship a sign of hope, only to learn it foreshadowed tragedy. You had reason to resent your rival, Monsieur Duval, but not to destroy him. Sebastien met Poirot's gaze. I did not kill her. No, Poirot said gently. You felt sorrow, often unrestrained sorrow, but not the cold calculation needed for the crime. Sebastien relaxed slightly, crossing and uncrossing his legs. Poirot turned to Charlotte. Mademoiselle Weatherby, you were the one who found the ledger. You saved the proof from destruction. You risked your life to preserve it, and you suffered for it. Charlotte's face paled, but she remained poised. I only did what she would have done. Poirot inclined his head. Your courage and loyalty are beyond question. He then looked at Inspector Garraway. Monsieur l'Inspecteur, you followed procedure and arrested Monsieur Linfield. You believed the case closed. I do not blame you. In fact, your actions revealed the true complexity of this crime. Garraway gave a stiff nod. Thank you, sir. I have learned much. Poirot allowed a moment for these words to settle. Then he folded his hands and spoke quietly but with firm resolve. There is one more among us whose actions determined the fate of Camilla Weatherby. He sat quietly at her side on a day meant for celebration, concealing in plain sight a will to silence her forever. He turned toward the closed door at the far end of the room. My heart thumped, but no one moved. Poirot raised his hand, and the door opened to admit Admiral Edwin Weatherby, flanked by 2 constables. His face was calm, betraying neither alarm nor defiance. Admiral, Poirot said, you are no stranger to command. You know that order depends on control. You saw your daughter as a threat to that order. She discovered your misuse of family funds. She threatened to expose you. In doing so, she forced your hand. The Admiral met Poirot's eyes. I had every right to protect my family. Protection does not require murder, Poirot replied. You enlisted Mr. Linfield's loyalty through blackmail. You used his fear to carry out the poisoning. Then you destroyed the ledger pages you believed would never be found. Finally, when force failed, you turned on any witness who stood in your path. The constables moved forward to restrain him. He did not. Resist. Poirot continued, addressing everyone in the room. The pattern of transfers, the forged memos, the matching ink, the testimony of Mr. Linfield, and Camilla's note all lead here. This is the final place where truth meets consequence. He nodded once to the constables. They escorted the Admiral out. The room remained still, the echo of footsteps fading. Poirot looked at the remaining group. The one crime that eclipses all is the betrayal of a child by her parent. It is a sorrow beyond words. Henry rose unsteadily. He was her father, he said, voice breaking. How could he? That question will never be answered, Poirot said softly. But justice will be served. Lady Duval buried her face in her hands. Charlotte placed a hand on Henry's arm. Sebastien stared at the floor. Inspector Garraway took notes. Poirot stood and gently closed the ledger. This case taught me that human nature is capable of both noble sacrifice and grave betrayal. Today we have set right one tragedy. May Miss Weatherby rest in peace. He gathered his hat and cane. Turning to me, he gave a slight smile. And now, Hastings, it is time to conclude our work here. I rose as he did, though my heart felt heavy. Together we walked out of the drawing room, leaving behind a scene of grief and relief mingled. The final gathering had released a torrent of emotion, but also brought the clarity Camilla herself had sought. The dawn after the Admiral's arrest was fragile, as if the world held its breath in relief and sorrow. In the library where Camilla's wedding portrait once stood, now only the empty easel remained, draped in white cloth. The household buzzed quietly with the preparations for departure. Servants packed trunks, boxes lined the corridor, and a small contingent of constables waited by the gate. The Duval carriage was ready to convey Henry and his mother to London, while Charlotte prepared to return to her uncle's home. I found Poirot in the drawing room, seated before the fireplace, his expression pensive. "Mon ami," he said, looking up, "the tapestry of this case is complete. Yet justice is not merely the capture of the guilty. It is the restoration of order." I poured 2 cups of tea from the silver pot. Poirot accepted one and sighed as he sipped. "Camilla Weatherby was a woman of principle," he continued. "She believed truth mattered. She paid the ultimate price for her convictions. Now, her name must be cleared in memory as well as law." Just then, Henry entered, pale but composed. He carried a small wooden box. "Sir," he said to Poirot, "this belonged to Camilla. I thought it right you have it." He opened the box to reveal a locket containing 2 miniature portraits, one of Camilla and one of Henry, painted in happier times. Inside the lid, an inscription read, "For the one who sees me truly." Poirot took the locket reverently. "Thank you, monsieur. She would have wanted you to have it." Henry swallowed. "I hope her courage isn't forgotten." "Nor her compassion," Poirot said softly. Henry nodded and left us to our thoughts. Lady Duval joined Poirot and me, hands wrapped around a handkerchief. "Detective," she began, voice steadier than I expected, "I wish to thank you. You saved what remained of my family's dignity." Poirot inclined his head. "You have endured more tragedy than most. Your sorrow is justified." She blinked back a tear. "I will see that Camilla is honored properly." At that moment, Charlotte reappeared, her steps measured. "I have arranged for the ledger to be given to the authorities and for copies to go to the bank. The rest of Miss Weatherby's papers will be sent to her estate in the country." Poirot smiled. "You have done well. The truth lives on." When Charlotte and Lady Duval departed, Poirot leaned back. "Justice here is twofold," he observed. "1, the law takes its course with Admiral Weatherby. 2, Camilla's reputation is restored among those who loved her." He took his teacup again, speaking as though to an empty room. She was right. The slow knife of truth cuts deeper but leaves no regret. The silent ledgers, the hidden memos, the whispered threats, all have come to light. I sat in silence for a long while, reflecting on how a single woman's resolve toppled a vast scheme. Finally, Poirot stood and adjusted his waistcoat. "Let us take our leave, Hastings. There is still much to do elsewhere." As we exited the drawing room, Inspector Garraway met us in the hall. "The Admiral's bail hearing is tomorrow," he reported. "He insists on representing himself, says he will explain to the magistrate how he protected his legacy." Poirot's lips curved. "Legacy built on lies cannot long stand, monsieur." Garraway chuckled. "You have a way with words, Mr. Poirot." Outside, the spring air had that crisp edge that promises renewal. The carriage waited, horses stamping softly as Henry and his mother prepared to depart under a guard of constables. Charlotte stood on the steps, waving gently. I waved too, as did Poirot, his posture uncharacteristically solemn. When the carriage turned the corner, Poirot guided me toward the gate. "Mon ami," he said quietly, "another case closes, but humanity's mysteries endure. Greed, betrayal, courage. These forces shape our world as much as any crime." I nodded, "And you showed us how a woman's bravery can unmask even the greatest of deceptions." He paused at the gate and looked back at Marchmont Hall, its windows bright with morning light, despite the sorrow within. "Camilla's spirit remains here," he said, "but ours moves onward, for there are always new puzzles awaiting the little gray cells." I smiled, thinking of how few could unravel such complex human webs. Poirot tipped his hat, and together we walked down the drive, leaving behind a house once shattered by murder, but now held firm by truth and justice. I watched as the motorcar carrying Henry and his mother faded down the tree-lined drive of Marchmont Hall. The sun, at last fully emerged, cast long beams upon the gravel, illuminating every footprint. It seemed fitting that Camilla's final departure should coincide with such clarity, a moment of light following the darkness. Yet as the carriage rounded the bend, I felt a quiet emptiness settle in the vast silence she left behind. Poirot stood at my side, his posture as erect as the day we first arrived. His gaze lingered on the retreating vehicle before he turned to me and gave a small nod. "C'est terminé," he said softly. "The case is closed, Hastings." I closed my notebook, the pages now full of observations, statements, and deductions. I slid it into my coat pocket. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot, it is finished, but I can't help feeling there is more to ponder than merely the mechanics of the crime." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Life is never only about mechanics, Hastings. It is about motives, consequences, and that curious thread we call human nature." We began our walk back toward the main entrance, where the last of the staff was gathering their belongings. A few servants paused to nod respectfully as we passed. Some offered brief words of sympathy for the household's losses. I responded with polite acknowledgments, but my mind raced ahead to the question that had been growing in my thoughts ever since Camilla's death. "As much as justice has been served," I ventured, "I find myself asking, did we truly do right by Camilla? Could her fate have been altered had we discovered the ledger sooner or confronted her father sooner? Is justice measured solely by conviction or by the prevention of tragedy?" Poirot regarded me thoughtfully. "Justice and prevention are twin sisters, but rarely walking hand in hand. If we had discovered the scheme before the wedding, perhaps steps could have been taken. But Camilla chose to proceed. She sought one final chance for reconciliation. She believed she could unmask the deceit without bloodshed. It is her choice that sealed her fate, not our delay." I nodded, though the weight of what-ifs lingered. She was courageous, perhaps too courageous for her own good. "Courage is a rare gift, Hastings," Poirot said. "It can become a perilous burden when wielded against the currents of greed and fear. Camilla's bravery forced the hand of a man unaccustomed to opposition." We reached the front steps and paused. The grand oak doors stood open, revealing the empty hall beyond. Chandeliers, now unlit, hung like silent witnesses to the events that had transpired. I glanced back at them, wondering what echo of sorrow remained within the halls. Poirot lifted his cane, tapping lightly on the stone. "These walls will remember more than any of us. They have heard laughter, vows, screams, and now, silence. But memory, Hastings, is a stubborn thing. It holds on to truth long after it has been spoken." I felt the stirrings of both admiration and sorrow. And what of the other characters in this drama? What becomes of Henry, Lady Duval, Charlotte, and even Sebastian? Their lives have been irrevocably altered. "With time," Poirot replied, "each will write a new chapter. Henry must rebuild trust and purpose in the shadow of loss. Lady Duval will face her own burden of regret and responsibility. Charlotte, having held the key to truth, may find her path guided by integrity. And Monsieur Vale," Poirot paused, a sly smile alighting his features, "he will carry the memory of unrequited love with him, perhaps wiser for it." The door opened, and Madame Tilbury, the housekeeper, stepped forward. She curtsied. "Monsieur Poirot, sir, it has been an honor to have you and Monsieur Hastings under this roof. We are forever grateful." Poirot inclined his head. "And I am grateful for the assistance of you and your staff. Order is maintained only by those who understand its value." She smiled faintly, tears in her eyes. "You have restored order, sir, and given us closure." With a gentle nod, Poirot accepted her gratitude. She withdrew, and the three of us, Poirot, myself, and the soft whisper of the morning breeze, stood on the threshold. I adjusted my hat. Shall we then? Poirot turned to me, his eyes reflecting both triumph and melancholy. Yes, Hastings, our journey here ends, but there are always other journeys ahead. He stepped outside and I followed. The gravel crunched beneath our feet as we crossed the lawn toward the road. As we walked, I glanced back one last time at Marchmont Hall, its stone facade bathed in sunshine and shadow alike. Poirot paused beneath a towering elm. He looked at me with that familiar glimmer of insight. Hastings, he said, imagine for a moment that Camilla had triumphed. She exposes the fraud, the family's legacy restored through honesty. What then? Would the bonds of blood have mended, or would the wounds of betrayal remain? I considered the question. I suppose time would tell. Trust, once broken, can be rebuilt only with patience and humility. Poirot nodded. And that, he said quietly, is the greatest mystery of all. Not who commits the crime, but whether the human heart can allow forgiveness. He lifted his cane and resumed walking. I followed, pondering his words. The morning air felt fresh, alive with possibility and with questions. As we reached the edge of the estate, the carriage for London's train station appeared in the distance, awaiting us. I turned to Poirot. Shall we board? He smiled, the corners of his mustache twitching. After you, mon ami. We climbed in, and as the carriage rolled onto the road, I allowed myself one final look at Marchmont Hall receding into the trees. The house that had witnessed love's promise and mortal betrayal now stood silent, a monument to both tragedy and truth. Poirot settled into the seat beside me, folding his hands in his lap. And so, he said reflectively, another case has concluded. Yet the question lingers. In seeking justice, do we ever truly reconcile the past? Or do we simply leave questions hanging in the air like notes in a chord that never resolve? I nodded, uncertain of the answer. The carriage rumbled onward, carrying us toward new mysteries and new puzzles. But as Marchmont Hall disappeared from view, I realized that some questions, like Poirot's final query, are not meant for neat resolutions. They are meant to echo, to challenge us, and to remind us that in the delicate dance between truth and forgiveness, the heart remains the ultimate enigma. And as the train station loomed ahead, I knew that wherever Poirot's little gray cells led us next, our search would continue, driven by the same curiosity, the same need to untangle human motives, and the same willingness to confront the greatest mystery of all, the human heart. Several weeks later, I received a letter bearing the familiar handwriting of Monsieur Hercule Poirot. It arrived at my London lodgings on a blustery autumn morning, sealed with wax and stamped with his personal crest. I set aside my papers, lit the fire, and broke the seal. Inside, neatly folded, was a single sheet of fine stationery. Mon cher Hastings, life must resume its course, but I find that certain cases leave an indelible mark on the soul. The affair at Marchmont Hall was more than a puzzle. It was a study in courage, duty, and the price of truth. I invite you to dine at my flat this evening so that we may discuss the particulars of the aftermath and share a cup of tea in comfortable reflection. À bientôt, Hercule Poirot. I smiled at his invitation, remembering how often he esteemed the ritual of tea as the proper complement to any intellectual endeavor. That evening, I arrived at his flat on Whitehaven Mansions to find him standing by the window, hands behind his back, gazing out at the gaslit street lamps that cast a warm glow against the gathering dusk. Monsieur Poirot, I greeted, I trust your invitation was not a ruse to draw me into another case. He turned with a mischievous twinkle in his eye. Mais non, Hastings. This is no new mystery, only the continuation of one we have already solved. It is the exploration of what follows justice. He led me to a small dining table, set simply but tastefully, with a pot of Darjeeling, 2 cups, and a plate of almond biscuits. As we sipped the tea, Its fragrant warmth seeped into the room, softening the edges of memory. I asked, "How fares the household at Marchmont Hall now that the truth has emerged?" Poirot's gaze softened. "I have received word from Madame Tilbury. She writes that the Duval family has begun reconstruction, both of the estate and of their relationships. Henry has engaged in philanthropic efforts in Camilla's name, establishing a foundation to aid victims of financial fraud. Lady Duval has, by all reports, sought reconciliation with her son, though she remains a solemn figure at family gatherings. And Charlotte, true to her character, has returned to her studies in law, determined to ensure that justice is not delayed for others." I nodded. "So their lives carry forward, not defined solely by tragedy, but enriched by purpose." "Exactement," Poirot said. "Camilla's legacy endures." He paused, then leaned forward. "But Hastings, even as justice prevails, one must consider the aftershocks. The conscience is an echo chamber. It reverberates long after the event itself. Admiral Weatherby sits in his cell still protesting that he acted in the family's interest. He has not accepted the full weight of his betrayal. And Linfield, released on compassionate grounds due to his cooperation, struggles with guilt for the role he played in the poisoning." I stirred my tea thoughtfully. "Do you believe punishment alone suffices?" Poirot shook his head gently. "No. True resolution requires more. A confrontation with one's own failings, an acceptance of responsibility, and the willingness to seek forgiveness, perhaps from those harmed, and most profoundly, from oneself. I doubt Weatherby and Linfield will find such peace behind bars, but I hope time brings them reflection." He rose and crossed to a small bookshelf, removing a volume of poetry, a gift from Camilla, inscribed with a line from her favorite poet, Shelley. He handed it to me. "She kept this in her dressing room," Poirot explained. "After her death, Charlotte sent it to me, saying Camilla believed that words had the power to endure where deeds might perish. Read the inscription." Inside the cover, in graceful script, was Camilla's handwriting. "Poetry is the record of the best and happiest moments of the happiest and best minds. May we strive to be among them." I closed the book softly. "She was a remarkable woman." Poirot's expression was solemn. "Indeed, and that, Hastings, is what elevates a case from mere detection to human drama. We seek culprits, uncover motives, and reconstruct events. But always, at the core, there are hearts beating with fear, love, and hope. Justice attends to the deed, but the soul requires more: understanding, compassion, and the chance to learn." I placed the poetry volume on the table. "Is that the final lesson, then? That solving a crime is only part of our duty, that we must also nurture the human spirit afterward?" Poirot nodded, folding his hands. "Precisely. The detective's work does not end with the reveal. It continues in the wake of the truth, guiding those who remain to find meaning in the aftermath." A comfortable silence followed, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in Poirot's sitting room beyond the dining alcove. I considered his words, feeling the weight and the grace of responsibility that came with knowledge. Finally, I asked, "And what of us, Monsieur Poirot? What do we take from this case into our future endeavors?" He gave a gentle, knowing smile. "We take the reminder that the greatest mysteries are not those of method or means, but of motive and morality. We sharpen our little gray cells. Yes, but we also remind ourselves that the greatest satisfaction lies not in unveiling a villain, but in restoring humanity." He stood and offered me his arm. "Shall we have another biscuit before you depart?" I accepted, rising as he walked me to the door. The night air outside was crisp, the stars bright above the lamplight. I paused on the threshold. "Monsieur Poirot," I said, "thank you for the invitation, the tea, and the insight." He bowed slightly. "And thank you, Hastings, for your constant companionship. Together, we have seen a wedding that ended in murder, but also witnessed how truth, courage and compassion can forge new beginnings. He closed the door behind me, and I stepped into the night, reflecting on all we had learned. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faint echo of Shelley's words. As I made my way home, I realized that our story at Marchmont Hall had indeed reached its end, but the questions it raised would linger, calling me to remember always that beneath every mystery lies the human heart, perpetually seeking redemption and understanding. And so, I closed my notebook on that chapter, carrying not only the satisfaction of justice served, but also the quiet conviction that even after the final clue is laid bare, the soul's own mystery endures. And that, perhaps, is the most profound enigma of all. We left Marchmont Hall at first light, the mist clinging to the hedges like a reluctant witness. The air was cool but held promise of warmth, as though the house itself exhaled relief at having borne the burden of its darkest secret. I sat beside Poirot in the carriage, suitcase at my feet, watching the long drive recede behind us. Every shuttered window and silent archway seemed to murmur one last farewell to the tragedy it had witnessed. Poirot remained silent for some time, hands folded calmly in his lap, his gaze directed toward the horizon. At last he spoke, almost to himself. "Hastings, each case is like a flower with many petals. Love, betrayal, courage, deceit. We have plucked them all from Marchmont Hall and laid them bare to the light of truth." I nodded, the leather seat creaking beneath me. And yet, one wonders, will the garden ever recover? Can the family truly move forward after such a storm? Poirot turned to me, his eyes reflecting both melancholy and hope. Recovery is the work of time. But truth, once revealed, sets the roots in stronger soil. Camilla's courage will nourish them long after we have gone. We rode in companionable silence until the carriage arrived at the small country station. The porter helped us down and the horses were led away. Poirot and I stepped onto the platform, the station master tipping his hat in recognition of Poirot's slight bow. "London?" the station master inquired. "We travel to Paddington, yes," Poirot replied crisply. I watched as Poirot purchased tickets for the morning express. As we waited, he turned and surveyed the station. A handful of benches, a single lamp still glowing against the pale sky, and a scattering of fellow travelers clutching newspapers and luggage. "Do you ever reflect on those we leave behind?" I asked softly. "The staff at Marchmont, the family members, do you think of them after a case closes?" Poirot smiled gently. "Always, Hastings. Their lives intertwine with our work. I think of Madame Tilbury's courage, Charlotte's steadfast devotion, Henry's grief and resolve, even Linfield's sorrow. They are part of the human tapestry we cannot forget." The whistle blew, and the train arrived with a screech of metal on rails. We climbed aboard, finding an empty compartment. Poirot settled onto the plush seat, patting the velvet cushion with satisfaction. "Do you remember, Hastings, how Camilla once said, 'A wedding is but a promise, a truth is forever'? I have found her words resonate beyond that day." I took the opposite seat, folding my coat neatly. She believed truth could redeem, and yet it cost her life. "Indeed," Poirot said solemnly, "but her sacrifice was not in vain. It brought justice, restored integrity, and inspired those she loved to carry her vision forward." He rose, moving to the window as the train prepared to depart. I followed, leaning beside him as the engine's steam hissed. Poirot's reflection wavered alongside mine in the glass. "As we journey onward," he began, "we carry more than evidence and conclusions. We carry the echoes of voices silenced and the hopes they entrusted to us. Our task is to honor those echoes." I watched the station slip away, whitewashed walls, waving porter, and the distant silhouette of Marchmont's turret at the bottom of the drive. The rails hummed beneath us, and the carriage lurched into motion. Poirot turned and smiled. Hastings, there is one last gift from Camilla we have not yet spoken of. He reached into his coat and produced a small envelope sealed with a monogram of entwined letters. C.W. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single photograph. Camilla in her wedding gown, radiant, holding Henry's arm. And beneath it, her handwriting, "Let love be our measure, and let truth be our guide. May those who remain find both in abundance." I looked up at Poirot. "She left this for us." "Not for us alone," he replied, "for all who seek justice and compassion. It is a reminder that behind every case lies the human heart." I folded the photograph gently and slipped it into my pocket. "I will keep it close." Poirot nodded approvingly. "And now, Hastings, let us return to London where new puzzles await. But let us also remember that each solution carries a responsibility to the living, to the departed, and to the fragile harmony of truth." The countryside rolled past the window as we settled back. I thought of the lessons learned, the danger of secrets, the power of conscience, and the indomitable spirit of a woman who dared to uncover the truth at the cost of her life. As the train gathered speed, Poirot closed his eyes for a moment, savoring the gentle motion. Then, opening them, he fixed me with a look of quiet resolve. "The world offers us many mysteries," he said. "Some dwell in shadows of human greed, others in the light of noble intent. We chase them all, Hastings, not because we crave fame, but because we believe that every thread we unravel helps mend the tapestry of humanity." I smiled, feeling the weight and the warmth of his words. The journey ahead promised fresh enigmas, but I carried with me the memory of Marchmont Hall and of Camilla, whose final act of bravery had illuminated the path we followed. The train roared into motion, and I leaned back, closing my eyes. In the steady rhythm of wheels on track, I heard a promise that even when a case ends, the quest for understanding continues, guided by the enduring light of truth and compassion. And so, with the echo of Camilla's words and Poirot's unwavering faith in the human heart, we journeyed on, into the next mystery, the next question, and the endless adventure of the little gray cells.